BioShock is the spiritual successor to Irrational Games' 1999 cult classic, System Shock 2. As a huge fan of the first and kind of the second game, that's a whole nother topic. Of course, I tried my hand at Shock 2, and to my dismay, it was difficult to get into due to its very heavy-handed role-playing elements. System Shock certainly serves a niche, hardcore RPG audience, so it's challenging for a newcomer to dive into. BioShock is very similar to its ancestor, but perfectly balances all the different gameplay mechanics. It still contains several RPG elements, yet manages to be accessible enough for mainstream audiences to quickly get the hang of. BioShock is the video game equivalent of the Indominus Rex. It's a strange hybrid of multiple different things that together form the ultimate killing machine.
That thing is a killing machine!
It serves as a first-person shooter first and foremost, an RPG, horror, strategy, stealth, and occasionally even a platformer experience. Nowadays, this level of blending, while not to the same extreme, is pretty common, but back in 07, this was almost unheard of. Usually, when you buy a game, you know exactly what you're getting. Action-adventure from Uncharted, survival horror and puzzles from Resident Evil, platforming in LBP. This is a first-person shooter, yes, but there are so many other genres at work here that it's difficult to classify besides just saying BioShock. Playing it for the first time feels like such a new experience, a breath of fresh air. But what really enhances the gameplay is how well it ties into the story and backstory of Rapture. The atom industry boomed as everyone was splicing. Even besides the war, plasmids had practical uses such as powering doors, melting frozen pipes, and moving furniture. So when Jack enters Rapture, he finds plasmids and tonics lying around for him to wield against the city's crazed inhabitants. Splicing isn't just thrown in there for the sake of cool gameplay. No, genetic manipulation is an integral piece to the story of Rapture itself. Unlike Vigors and Infinite, that have no place in Columbia society, but are thrown in there because we had them in the first two games. Anyways, plasmids act pretty much like magic. You get to fight with these wild superpowers. But tonics act more like perks, upgrading the player's stats, while also providing some cool upgrades such as invisibility with natural camouflage, and immunity to electricity with electric flesh. The same concept goes with all the guns. Rapture just went through a bloody civil war during its fall, in which pretty much everyone was involved, from fishermen to storekeepers. So it makes sense that there are plenty of weapons and ammo lying around Rapture. So that's plasmids and guns down, but I haven't even mentioned the greatest weapon in the game yet, the environment. The gameplay in BioShock is all about using whatever the world throws at you to your own advantage, which is one of the reasons why it never gets stale. Every area, every room is totally different and requires you to think on your feet. Some rooms have turrets, cameras, and security bots. You instantly have to deal with these, and can even hack them to go after splicers instead. Health stations are a common sight across the city. You can either heal from them or hack them to heal for a lower price and poison any splicers who try to use them. There are also oil drums that you can use. You can light them on fire or shock them to cause an explosion, or grab and hurl them at enemies with telekinesis. When a splicer is in the water, electrical attacks are super deadly. Heck, you can even make your own Molotov cocktails with the bottles of alcohol lying around. Actually, that's kind of poetic. Using a clear symbol of Rapture's immorality as a means of killing the inhabitants whose lack of morality caused them to go insane. There are so many different things you can do in this game. BioShock was designed with the concept that if you think you can do something, you can. The possibilities are endless. Everybody will play BioShock differently just because of how many different ways there are to play. Investing in different plasmids, equipping different tonics, different ammo types, and utilizing different weapons provide for totally unique gameplay experiences. You can play more melee based with tonics such as Wrench Jockey, Sports Boost, and Wrench Lurker. With natural camouflage, Wrench Lurker, and the crossbow, you can play a far more stealthy game. There's the plasmid heavy route or commando guns blazing. You can even main fire, ice, or electricity with the right upgrades and tonics. Rapture is your playground to do whatever you wish. Well, that's what sank the city in the first place, but you know what I mean. Now, all this is well and good, but the splicers aren't too formidable of enemies. One explosion in, and they're dead. Thankfully, Ryan Industries provided the perfect target for you to experiment all your tactics on, the Big Daddy. These guys are strong, salty spittoon levels of tough enemies. Any head-on battle with them will almost certainly end in death. Thankfully, Big Daddies don't attack you unless you attack them or their little sister first. Otherwise, they're totally passive. This allows you to plan out your attack beforehand. Sometimes you have to wait several minutes until they're in just the perfect position before you use everything in your arsenal to bring these behemoths down. All your plasmids, weapons, and the environment get pulled into this fight. Again, you must master your surroundings to win. You need security to be fighting alongside you, traps for them to be lured into, or a bunch of barrels to throw. This is what makes Big Daddy fights so engaging. They require you to utilize every single gameplay mechanic in a desperate attempt to survive. Unlike... I'm not gonna go there. Link in the description. One more thing to enjoy is the amount of exploration in BioShock. Well, remember, this was 2007. There's not a giant map for you to roam. This isn't one of those kinds of games. But each area in Rapture provides plenty for the player to explore for themselves. The game actively encourages this kind of behavior. A lot of levels actually require you to explore in order to progress. In Medical Pavilion, you need to find a telekinesis plasmid, but the game just gives you the whole area and says, okay, go find it. In Neptune's Bounty, you have to find spider splicers to photograph for Wilkins. Farmer's Market has you look for Lazarus Vector components, and so on and so on. Even outside of progressing in the story, the player is still rewarded for exploring every nook and cranny with safes, tonics, and audio diaries. But in one level, there's a penalty for exploring. Before I get ahead of myself, let's get one thing straight. BioShock isn't a soak your pants, scream your lungs out kind of game. It has horror elements, but it's less of an amnesia and more of a dead space. You're never really running for your life scared to death, but the world and enemies are very unsettling. Both certainly have their standout moments though, and their lighter, less stressful times. The splicers the player encounters throughout the city are very unnerving as you hear them crying and mumbling to themselves. Their ugly faces also don't help. Wait, hold up. Okay, there we go. Some splicer variants are more disturbing than others. Of course, you've got your melee, firearm, and explosive variants represented by Thuggish, Leadhead, and Nitro splicers respectively. But we're also introduced to Spider and Houdini splicers, both needing you to rely mostly on your hearing to determine where they're launching their attacks from. Houdinis disappear and reappear with whooshing sounds and red smoke, and you get to hear spiders clinging on the walls with their hooks. So you end up hearing your enemies before seeing them, adding to the creepiness. You can just imagine my reaction in Fort Frolic, where you're swarmed by spider splicers.
Oh, spiders! Spiders! Get them off me! Get them off me! Get them off me!
Wake up! It's me!
Beginning in Hephaestus, splicers even begin to play dead. Then when you walk past one, thinking they're a corpse, they spring up to ambush you. I've been so traumatized that I always test bodies I see before approaching. Besides that, there are plenty of intense and creepy moments throughout the course of BioShock, like this little bit right here. Areas such as Apollo Square and Medical Pavilion have generally creepy atmospheres to them, and even the warmer and brighter places like Arcadia seem to devolve the deeper you go. I told you Fort Frolic will keep coming up. Immediately upon entering Rapture, the game sets a very dark and creepy tone, with poor Johnny getting murdered before your very eyes by a spider splicer. But Fort Frolic is where the horror is ramped up to level 11. Aside from being a Bill Cosby wonderland, it serves as the mobile of nightmare fuel. Most of the fort is very dimly lit, with your main light source being the spotlights Cohen shines on you. So while your enemies stalk you, hidden in the darkness, you're a vulnerable, lit up target. Of course, it's not only the darkness that causes it to be creepy as dung. If so, then emos would be the scariest thing ever. Fort Frolic throws at you the strangest and deadliest enemies in the game. It's spider and Houdini splicers galore, but there is one enemy that can only be found in Fort Frolic's Poseidon Plaza. One of the stores the player can explore in the mall is Sinclair Spirits, a small bar decorated with Cohen's signature art. Wait, now it's art. At first glance, it appears to be a nothing special room with no audio diaries or tonics, but take a closer look and you'll notice a conspicuous switch behind the cash register. After pressing the switch, you notice a door open. As you go down its steps, you notice that it leads to a flooded wine cellar. But hey look, it has a safe and a weapon upgrade station. I guess this place wasn't so pointless after all. But upon using the station, you realize... Suddenly, all the statues in Sinclair Spirits vanish. They have now become the dreaded plastered splicers. These spoopy boys move and fight like the regular spider splicers, but are faster, stronger, and completely silent. Unlike all the other crazies you see around Rapture who mumble to themselves, the plastered splicers make no sounds. They are the epitome of silent but deadly. You wouldn't even know one was stalking you until the initial blow. As you waltz around Poseidon Plaza, they'll even spawn around you in statuesque poses and attack when you're not looking. They act like ghosts and continuously haunt your trip to the strip. After releasing them, a stairway to the Poseidon Plaza basement is unlocked. Like the cellar, it's totally flooded, but there are some goodies on the far side. Upon acquiring the tonic, along the actual clothing mannequins will spawn more plastered splicers. And all this nightmare fuel only happens once you use the power to the people station. An easy to overlook detail can dramatically change the player's experience. Most casual players probably go the entire game without even knowing what lurks in the shadows. Ken Levine and Irrational Games as a whole achieved tremendously with BioShock, but with this tower of success, there are a few garbage bins left on the street. No work of art is perfect, but thankfully, the monumental heights of this game far exceed its problems. But as I try to be an objective critic, I do have to point them out. The first and really only main complaint I have are the Vita chambers. Every time Jack dies, he immediately gets resurrected in the last one he's passed. The explanation given is that, for their testing, Andrew Ryan only allowed Tsuchong to tune them to his genetic frequencies. Because Jack has half of Ryan's DNA, he gets revived as well. This would be a fine respawn system, but it comes with two problems. There is no penalty for dying, you don't lose any money or atom, and the enemies that killed you don't regain any health. So if you get killed by a Big Daddy or something, you can keep respawning and wear them down with each attack. It's super cheap and takes away from any intensity the game provides. Also, Vita chambers create some massive plot holes. Like, Andrew Ryan turns his chamber off and accepts death when he really doesn't have to. He can just keep respawning. Also, why would Fontaine challenge Jack in the end if these things exist? Heck, why would he even attempt to kill Ryan in the first place? It's like Fontaine has a death wish, trying to take on an invincible man. The game's workaround for this gaping hole is giving the player the option to disable Vita chambers, so dying forces you back to your last save, making for a much more fair and challenging experience, but you still see them around the city. So if you just turn them off, pretend you can't see them, and don't pick up the audio diary that explains them, problem solved. At least, that's what I do. My second problem is the moral choice system. Not because it's black and white between objectivism and altruism, but that the altruism isn't altruistic enough. Again, harvest for max atom gain but at the expense of the girls, or rescue for minimum atom but saving them. Looking out for yourself versus looking out for others. Great, we went over this last time, but I think the rescue option is too self-rewarding. You get 80 atom for each girl you deslug, but 200 Atom along with tonics and plasmids for every 3. Harvesting gives you 160 straight up each time. Overall, you get more Atom harvesting, but someone can still make the argument that rescuing grants the better reward, so you can play good for selfish reasons still, robbing the altruism of its, well, altruism. That, along with the lack of guilt for killing little girls, makes rescuing the obvious choice. My solution is a bit radical, but this game is all about being radical, so who cares? What if rescuing the little sisters granted the player 0 Atom? The only Atom you'd get would be from Tenenbaum's gifts. This would ramp up the moral dilemma, giving the good path a true sense of self-sacrifice. This tweak would also greatly impact the gameplay, with harvest run-throughs having a stronger focus on splicing and growing in power, while rescuing would result in a greater reliance on weapons and research to get by. You would still get the plasmids and tonics found along the way, but they would be more secondary. But anyways, this isn't really a problem like Vita Chambers, but I wish BioShock was willing to go even further than it did in this regard. Also, there's the evil ending. Again, not that it's a problem. Instead of Jack going from a programmed robot to a normal person, it goes from Jack being a robot to a monster. It's an interesting path to show, but you can tell it's a bit tacked on, as it's not the real canon ending like the good one. One final thing I'll mention is something I wish was added to the game, but sadly was cut for time. Splicing driving you crazy. It only makes sense. Splicers went crazy due to their excessive splicing. If Jack is splicing as much as he is within the one day in which the game takes place, then shouldn't he get totally wasted from all the shooting up he's been doing? So it would be cool if the more you spliced, the crazier you got. Maybe some effects would appear on screen, you'd see more ghosts, you'd move slower, and the aim would be unsteady, like if Jack has the shakes. And this addition would further explore the idea of humanity, as the player has to balance power and their own humanity. With every upgrade, there's a trade-off with sanity. Like McDonough said, it's about who can be less of a man and more of a monster. Again, this would make the player balance weapons with plasmids, causing even greater differentiation in playstyles. BioShock is an amazing game and my favorite work of art as a whole. When I first played it, I believe I was only 9, and it blew the lid on everything I thought I knew about gaming. They're not mindless distractions that rot your brain, as the elderly would say. They can be just as, if not more, thought-provoking and impactful than film, television, and books. BioShock got me into game criticism and then film criticism. It's not a stretch to say that this one game created Tim Rex in the long run. Maybe it seems like I'm hyping it up too much, but I personally believe it as awesome of a game as I described. The underwater dystopia is brought to life so well. Every level, every character, every enemy is dripping with personality. The themes, morals, and ideas about objectivism, humanity, family, religion, and altruism are so masterfully woven into every aspect of this piece. Gameplay is whatever the player wants it to be and is so unlike any other game I've played, even its own sequels. And that twist though, BioShock has among the best plot twists ever written. The story, the gameplay, and the themes all fit nearly perfectly hand in hand, creating immersion deeper than the city itself. In spite of a few minor details that maybe fell through the cracks, BioShock is a once-in-a-generation kind of game, and that is why BioShock is not one of, but my very favorite thing. Thank you for watching this insanely long, multi-part analysis of BioShock, and thanks for the 100 subscribers. See you next week.